You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles, welcome back to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, live on the My Dear 1090 ESPN Radio. Thank you all for staying with us. This is your RamsHouse edition. So what's up, Ramley? This is the Los Angeles Rams segment of the program, of the show. If you're on podcast, welcome back. Thank you always for following the LA Football Network. Joined as always by the Madman, Jamal Madney. What's up, my brother? How we doing? Welcome back.
Doing well, Rye. Excited to talk some Rams and get into it with this offseason. We got McVay coming back, obviously, and that's been the dominant storyline the last 7 or 10 days. And I have some interesting questions for you, actually, about what that means and moving forward. And also, I think there may be a very interesting play on the current state of the playoffs and how that could affect the Rams' long-term strategy.
Love it. Okay. All right. We'll turn the tables a little bit, but I will first start per usual. First of all, show brought to you as always by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. They should have some futures up on there, or maybe some potential Rams OCs or coaching candidates or whatnot. You can find it all at BetOnline. So let me start with this, Jamal, with our Rams. And very open-ended question, very broad question. But on Thursday, Les Snead, like the Chargers with Tom Telesco, Les Snead has his kind of end-of-season press conference, or had another press conference. I guess their season's been over for a couple weeks now. But, and talked to reporters and addressed some things and kind of said some things in the fact of we're static. Sean's back, obviously. They work together. There's going to be sweeping changes to the coaching staff, which we saw come to fruition today. Kevin Carberry gone, Joe DeCamillis, special teams coordinator gone. And it was kind of all phrased as mutual agreements, not necessarily firings, just kind of making these different changes among the staff. And looking at the state of this Rams team, Jamal, and Aaron Donald's coming back officially, or per Twitter officially. Matthew Stafford's coming back. Obviously, McVay's coming back. So my question for you is, listening to Snead, knowing McVay, knowing Stan Kroenke, can we expect another, or knowing that the Rams will potentially have 10 draft picks in this draft, albeit all of them at the back end, but still 10 picks, can we expect the Rams, in your opinion, to still be very aggressive this offseason because of how they do things, how they operate, and how they move money around? Or does this feel more like a free agency? They're going to kind of have to stand pat. We'll see what they do with those 10 draft picks and kind of go from there.
Ryan, it's a great question. I actually think, given the level of intelligence of Stan Kroenke and Les Snead and that brain trust, I actually think it's bad business, and I think it's bad football operations management to try and go all in for 23. I think you need to be able to see whether or not this core has one more run in it, because I think there's a fundamental reality that Jalen Ramsey's past his prime, Aaron Donald is past his prime, Matthew Stafford is past his prime. And so how much do you want to bleed into trying to win now, given that reality? Nothing is going to change that reality of those three individuals. And it's a painful thing to say, and it's a painful thing to admit. And it's not something Snead would tell anyone outside of maybe just Kroenke and McVay, or maybe just Kroenke, given McVay's relationship to these players as well and how close he is. But I think
maybe just his wife.
To factor in. Yeah,
exactly. Maybe just his wife.
And I just have a hard time believing that they'll do it and under the right circumstances of what is sound football operations. I think this is all about, let's bring the band together. We didn't really get a chance to see whether this core could make another run at it, given injuries and given the decimation of the offensive line primarily. Let's beef up, use the picks to really go hard on offensive line, set these guys up for success. and then give it one more run. Maybe make a couple incremental moves, maybe take a couple of those 10 picks and get some nice pieces around these guys to make one more run at it. But I don't think it's going to be this, let's give up 5 picks for a star or 7 picks for a superstar type of situation, because at the end of the day, you got $62 million guaranteed going to a guy who's past his prime, who can still be a very, very good quarterback. You've got another $60 million going to the greatest defensive player of the 21st century, but he's also past his prime in a very physical position. And then you've got a situation with Jalen Ramsey, who's also, it's been kind of shown that he's past his prime. And so you've got so much money invested in these guys. I think you want to give it one more run, see what's around them a little bit incrementally. And then after 23, say, I think it's time to blow it up and really start from the ground up again.
See, this Jamal is what makes, in my opinion, this offseason so fun and exciting from an analysis standpoint and from a kind of building a roster standpoint, because, the Rams have done some fun. Well, I wouldn't say fun. They've done some strategic things and smaller moves. It's not like they've never done that, but obviously the big things the Rams have do over the last 3-4 years is these blockbuster trades, these big free agent signings, like the star power, the sunshine, the LA, it all goes hand in hand. But now you're sitting here, as it stands right now, per over the cap, sitting at 14 million over the cap, literally over the cap. And so obviously they'll move some money around to get to where they need to be, but they just don't have money to go out and spend. And there'll be some, probably, I'm sure, cuts and June 1 designations and stuff like that that'll free some stuff up, but they can't get a marquee free agent. I agree with you. It would be very unwise to trade high-end draft capital for rentals that they can't even afford unless you're doing full back-end extensions. Now, that being said, and I think this is what you're getting at as well to an extent, I agree with you. Stafford, Donald, Ramsey, all past their prime, but still very good players and still can absolutely win. And you still have Cooper Kupp, hopefully coming back 100%, is still, in my opinion, the top 2 receiver in football. So what makes it so fun now is we've seen them do it this way, the all-in approach, throw caution to the wind. Now we get to see them get really granular. And who's those 2 or 3 under the radar free agent signings? The Troy Hill from a few years back, the Darius Williams. Remember, it was technically, I think, a trade, but coming off of, I think it was a signing off Baltimore's essentially cut from Baltimore, and he ends up having a very nice career here. Who are those kind of players that they can really under the radar pay small money for, come in and play a big role, surrounded by a great organization and still very, very good players in a lot of key positions, and B, with 10 draft picks, and yes, they're later round draft picks, and always we've seen the Rams, at least these last 4 or 5 years, trade back and get more draft picks, trade back and get more. Well, now maybe we'll see them package like 3 6-round picks and move up into the 4th round or move up back into the 3rd round and get another more marquee player instead of getting, 6 and 7th round picks that one pans out and the other 5 are off the roster in training camp. So it's going to be really fun and fascinating to see how they do things, because it's going to be so different than how they've done things over this past couple of years. And I think they can do it because I think the core is still good enough to win. By all means, you have the key pieces in place, you have your coach back, but it's just going to be, they're going to have to do it differently than what we've seen before, which makes it really fun to cover this team.
Yeah, right. You said it best. And there's sort of the all-in, let's make the big splash approach. There's your sort of in a full-on rebuilding mode. And then there's this fun in-between where you have a window, the window's closing, you're running out of runway, but you also know that you either have enough or are very close to having enough to making a deep run. And so I love what you were saying of taking 3 6s and getting a 4, taking, a 4 and a 5 and going and packaging it for, a known player and maybe someone under the radar that could potentially be a real difference maker for you. So I think this is where I think Les Snead's football acumen is going to come into play in a huge way. And in a lot of senses, this could be one of those defining years of Les Snead when we look back on his career and say, you know, he was great and he won a Super Bowl and hopefully more, been to multiple Super Bowls as the head of the Brain Trust. But let me tell you, man, that 23 offseason that he was able to put together with these under-the-radar moves was really the big difference. And I think when you talk about the great minds in sports, whether it's a Pat Riley or a Phil Jackson or a Jerry West or, you know, the great brain trusts in NFL history, it's those under-the-radar years that are actually most significant for them. And I think Les Snead is having a great time right now. This is, in much we talked about McVay kind of feeling the burnout a little bit, and hopefully he's recharged now and ready to go. I think the total opposite is the case with Les Snead, where I think he's enjoying his job right now, today, tonight, more than any other time potentially in his career because of those creative challenges that you pose so brilliantly, and also the knobs that he can turn to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be really fun to watch what they do. So, all right, I have one more question for you, and then I have a theory I want to happen, and then I'll turn it over to you for your hosting ability and do that. So first, the question. Now, obviously, there was all the speculation. McVay's going to retire. Is it burnout? Is it something going on behind the scenes? Is it personal reasons? We now see on just Thursday, I think it was a total of 4 or 5 coaches total that were dismissed, parted ways, whatever you want to call it. The big names being Carberry, the O-line coach, and Joe DeCamillis, the special teams coach. My question, does that tell you that there was some strife between coaches and that could have led to McVay not enjoying it? Or is it more of just differing of opinions, and that's why there was, you know, obviously the injuries were the big storyline, but that's why there was so much turmoil this season, because you had coaches that just didn't see things, which is odd because they were just a Super Bowl winning team and it's basically the same coaching staff. But what does that tell you? Is it just a strange thing where it's like, let's start fresh? Or does it show you that there was trouble behind the scenes?
I think it tells you how much power Sean McVay has and how much he is valued in this organization. And I don't think it's necessarily that there was challenges with those particular coaches beyond the normal set of challenges when you're not winning in a particular season. I think it has to do with really trying to do all they can to make 23 feel different for McVay. Because when you are feeling burnout, and I've been there in my career professionally, and when you're tired and when everything seems to be a grind, you can take a couple of days off. But if you go back to the exact same situation, the exact same office, the exact same work, the exact same processes, the exact same people, the exact same strategy, let me tell you, that feeling of being refreshed over a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks that you've had a vacation goes away very quickly and cannot sustain on itself. And so I think what the organization is trying to do is saying, let's bring in some fresh voices with some new energy. And let's hope that that change makes you really feel like this is a new year, and in turn gives you even more energy to sort of do your job. Because McVay has often talked about the passion that he has in mentoring other coaches. And I think that he takes the tree and the lineage that he comes from very, very seriously, and he's very proud about it. And I think one of his lasting legacies is going to be the tree that he creates, that he's at the root of moving forward. So I think the organization is doing a brilliant job of turning those knobs and saying, what are the things that get him really excited, and how can we eliminate burnout as much as possible and really make him feel like this is a new year and he can turn the page.
Yeah. So here's my theory, and it's basically just piggybacking off of that. Just kind of adding, because I agree with what you're saying. And this is a theory, I don't want to pin this on anyone or any sources. So, but my theory is, because knowing Sean McVay as a coach and how hands-on he's been his entire coaching career, and how involved he is and invested he is in, obviously, play calling in the offense, but invested in everything. That's what makes him so good. And that's why he said he doesn't want to coach till he's 50, because he sees how much time he puts into this. My theory is the 2021-22 season, the Super Bowl team, that was that's the Sean McVay we always know. He was involved in everything, decision-making with offensive line personnel decisions, decision-making on defense, decision-making on the special teams, helping. I mean, I've been at training camp where I'm seeing him doing stuff on all different facets of the field with all different sides of the ball. Obviously, his bread and butter is offense, but he's doing everything. So I think he did that, and the Rams won a Super Bowl. He was feeling burnout then. That's why the rumors cropped up, because of how much he's pushing himself to do every little thing. So this year he says, all right, we won the Super Bowl. We have the same coaching staff. I want to delegate things so I don't get burned out, because I want to coach the rest of my contract, whatever it is, 4 or 5 years. Delegated, and we see what happened. Stuff fell through the cracks. Obviously, injuries were the big deal, but stuff wasn't running as well and as oiled as it was when he was running everything. So I think, to now piggyback off what you were saying, it's basically saying, love you guys. We have the same philosophy, but I need, if I'm going to keep doing this, at least for this year or next year, I need coaches in here that I can delegate and are going to actually excel at doing and running that system and running that department. So I don't have to have my hand, because I am getting burnt out. And so you can obviously, you can counter argue or comment on that, but that's what leads me to my final point before turning over to you. An offensive line coach that is sitting on his couch right now, who's a Hall of Famer, Mike Munchak, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. Rams have all the money in the world. Coaches don't go against the cap. So if I'm Stan Kroenke, I'm going to Mike Munchak, who's been a head coach before. He's one of the best offensive. He'll go down as probably a top 3 offensive line coach of all time. And he's been interviewed for other head coaching jobs as recently as 2 years ago. I'm going to him and saying, come to LA, come to where the sunshine is. Maybe we can get Andrew Whitworth to be an assistant offensive line coach. You can help run the offense. You can be an assistant head coach as well to help out Sean McVay. And that, I think, would alleviate a lot of that stress of having to have his hand on everything, but knowing that he can trust who's running it, because it's a guy who's done that before. So that's my theory.
No, Ryan, I love it. And I think it's very accurate, because I think ultimately we need the coaches in the room that have the credibility and the respect of Sean McVay, given what their track record is, and B, that's going to help this organization get the answer to this following question as quickly as possible. And that is this core done? Or was this core in 2022 the byproduct of such poor offensive line play? And that if you can put in a more credible scheme there and, serviceable personnel week over week, this team absolutely can be in the NFC Championship game next year, can absolutely be in the Super Bowl next year. And I think that type of move does both things at the same time. So I absolutely love it. And hopefully you're friends with Snead and all of that, the high roller, you got the number, Ryan, drop your boy Les a text here and be like, listen, man, I was just thinking this could be a good move for you. Let me throw you a little bit of a solid. I see you're struggling a little bit right now.
Yeah, I'll get him on the phone. We'll meet in Cabo. We'll do some Cabo stuff in February, have some drinks, some margaritas, and get Munchak on the phone there, because to me and we'll see what happens. I've heard other names floated around, like Bill Callahan with the Browns. To me, Bill Callahan's a phenomenal offensive line coach, but that's a lateral move. I don't know why Cleveland would allow that. He's the offensive line coach with Cleveland. So even with the Rams making him an assistant head coach, I don't think that goes around the block, to my knowledge. Again, there's a lot of confusing lingo in there, but I think because the main role would be offensive line. But Munchak's, he's on his couch, and I think he would certainly think about coming back for a team like this and an organization like this. And I would love to see it. And then he obviously has prowess on offense, being a head coach, and would take a lot of the pressure off. So we shall see. But tossing over to you, I know you had some fun things you want to talk about.
Yeah, Ryan. I have one theory here, and I want to sort of bounce that off of you. And that is, should the Rams fans be 49er fans in the playoffs? And the only reason I ask that question is the thing that could potentially motivate McVay to stay longer term beyond this year is, what if one of his peers won a Super Bowl like Kyle Shanahan? It's a little bit different when, like, your brother wins something and it becomes kind of a sibling rivalry, a LaFleur, a Shanahan, a McDaniel. These are the kinds of things, the individuals we think of as in that Sean McVay ilk. we don't think about McDermott as sort of a Sean McVay contemporary. We don't think about Andy Reid that way. We don't think about Dable that way. We don't think about a lot of guys that way, even Zach Taylor. But if Shanahan were to win a Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden it becomes this rivalry between these friends, same coaching tree, came up together, does that inspire McVay to reach down and say, man, there's still so much fire in this belly here, and I want to be the de facto winner of my era, of my tree, that creates a longer-term lifespan for Sean McVay as the Rams coach? I wonder that, Ryan, and I want to pose that to you in the short time we have left.
Oh, man. It's a fascinating thought because I agree. I mean, obviously, I think Sean cares about legacy, but I don't know if it's obviously the fact that he almost retired last year. I don't know if it's enough to make him coach 20, 30 years. Obviously, I think he knows how accomplished he is and what he's able to do. But it's a fascinating thought because they are so closely intertwined in their coaching careers. For Rams fans out there, I don't see how anyone could cheer for the 49ers, even if it's benefiting potentially your franchise's future. Because there's still no guarantee, right? Like you could cheer and be like, okay, this is going to help. And then they win. And then Sean McVay still hangs it up after one more year. But I totally agree with your thought process there and reasoning. And if you're asking me what I think he would do, I think that would make him want to come back because you see, obviously they love each other. They're like brothers. They came up together, but you can tell it drives coach crazy that they cannot beat the Niners in the regular season. Like that he has to get asked every time, why does Kyle have your number? Why does he? You can tell it drives him nuts. And now if their record they've coached the same amount they've been a head coach the same amount of years. And if they're both gone to 2 Super Bowls, each winning 1, I feel like it would be very difficult for him to say, all right, I'll walk away. And with the team San Francisco has, if they keep it all together, they could win 2 or 3 if with their age and youth and money right now, they could go on a run here and leave kind of McVay in the dust. So it's an interesting question. Very interesting. It'd be hard to root for him.
To me, they seem like the modern, sexier, offensive version of the 2 Bills with Parcells and Belichick. And remember how close they were, and Belichick being Parcells' assistant, and then obviously Belichick getting the Patriots job, and then ultimately getting to this enormity of success. And it completely changed the dynamic between Parcells and Belichick. They were no longer mentor, protege, teacher, student, and then friends. They became this sort of frenemy to, hey, we're just going to kind of avoid each other and pretend we're still friends type of relationship. And I think it hits differently if a LaFleur wins the Super Bowl, a Shanahan wins the Super Bowl of that same tree for McVay. And can you imagine if history will recognize Kyle Shanahan as the greater coach? Like what happens if Shanahan wins this Super Bowl, McVay retires next year, and Shanahan wins another Super Bowl? I mean, and you know, how does history think about Sean McVay at that point, to your point about legacy being so important to him? So I know it's very counterintuitive. I know it's a very awkward thing to talk about, but it's this interesting Rams 49ers dynamic where you almost need the rival. You know, the Batman needs the Joker, to be able to be effective. You need your rival. It's kind of the way John McEnroe said, hey, I wish Bjorn Borg didn't retire at 26. I lost motivation because my greatest rival was gone. And I wonder if the flip is also true, that when your greatest rival has earned success, does that bring about new motivation and a new energy that you didn't believe you had?
Yeah, well, and you could even compare like John Elway and Dan Marino, right? And they both obviously had different style of careers, different teams, but going into their last 4 years, neither of them had won a Super Bowl. And Elway wins 2 in a row, walks off into the sunset. Marino plays one more season, probably thinking, okay, if I can just get one to be on that level, and obviously it didn't happen. But yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. So we'll see. Good thought though. So did you have another thought you said, or is that it?
No, that was it. That was the big haymaker that I had.
I love it. Well, we shall see what these Rams do. It's going to be a fascinating, fun offseason. Hopefully Mike Munchak is on the Rams sideline and horns. I think that would be an absolutely slam dunk hire. We talked to OCs and offensive coordinator potentials, last episode. I'm sure we'll talk more with all, in the next episode, because now there's 10 offensive coordinator openings in the NFL. So a lot of competition for all these teams. Obviously the Rams is a very desirable destination, but also a little tougher for OC because they're not going to be calling plays. So it's a different dynamic where we talked about potentially they go the option of just having a pass game coordinator and a run game coordinator instead of a traditional OC. Lot to unpack there, but we'll keep it all there all off season long. That's all the time we have. This is the LA Football Show on the LA Football Network. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyrud. Ramley, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.